Hello, this is Craig, and welcome to another episode of Cruising Off Duty. Okay, after the last episode, where I showed you that I have an issue with my iPhone getting cold, and obviously living in Canada, I cannot get around the fact that outside is cold, I tried this Acer Android tablet just to see if it would actually work, and it works, but it doesn't work. It works, shows you exactly what's on the screen. Unfortunately, it only can be in landscape mode, which means when you're holding the controller like this, your screen is sideways, and you can switch it around so that it's that way or that way, but it will not go this way. So that's kind of a bummer. I was kind of hoping it would turn the direction that's straight up and down, but that won't happen. The only other option with this, and I still haven't gone outside, I'm planning to try and put this outside in my cold car or in my garage somewhere cold and see if the battery drops really fast. If so, then there's really no point. It's no better than my iPhone, but I got a funny feeling it's going to be better than my iPhone. It can't be worse. Anyways, long and short, the other option is get a longer cord than what I have on here now. Actually, this holds it pretty good. These little rubber feet really work to clamp it in. But you could take it out, and put it on a stand. If you were going to sit somewhere, you could have it on a stand and then use your controller with obviously a longer cord than this, and use your controller as your flight thing, and then just look down at your screen that's down on a stand below you as to what the camera's going to do. And that's an option. So first thing to do is test if this thing dies in the cold. If it doesn't die in the cold, that's an option. Another thing is, if it doesn't die in the cold, is it worth getting a smaller Android tablet? Like I said, this is a 10-inch, but I think Android sells 7-inch, 8-inch that would be able to fit in between the grips on this controller. So that's another option. But whether you want to spend the money to buy a 7-inch or 8-inch tablet just to use as a screen in the wintertime for your Mavic Pro, kind of a tough decision, because I don't see myself ever using a 7-inch tablet. I use this thing to consume content, and I don't want to look at a tiny screen. If I do, I might as well just look at it on my phone. So those are the issues. I'll figure out if this thing can actually hold its battery life in the cold. That'll be another thing. And then the rest of this episode, I want to talk about the settings that I've set my Mavic Pro to from the factory, which were way too quick. And we're talking about the settings like the Expo, and the Expo, it controls the speed in which the drone turns when you hit the left and right joystick. It pans to the right or pans to the left. From the factory, it's just way too fast. You have to be very minute if you want slow, and you know, especially if your hands are freezing cold like mine were yesterday. It's pretty hard to feel your fingers well enough to know if you're doing just a tiny movement or too much. But you'll see it right away on the camera. It'll just whip around. But you can change those settings, and I'll show you how to get into that. Also, you can change the settings of the gimbal, how quickly it turns down. I know right from the factory it was too quick. The minute you use this little spinning wheel here and turn the gimbal down, it was just too quick. It just started way too fast, and so I've turned that down as well. I will show you how to get in and change those settings, and then sort of going along with that, the next thing I want to talk about is the tripod mode, which is the factory settings that bring it really slow. Like the settings I'm going to talk to you about changing are going to make it slower, but the drone will still fly at its full speed. It's just when you accelerate, it'll accelerate slow and then speed up, as opposed to just jerking forward. And when you turn, it'll turn slow unless you leave it over there, and that's what Expo stands for, is exponential. So with exponential set really slow at the beginning, a movement at first will only slowly move, and then if you hold it pinned right over to the edge, it'll realize you really want to go a lot faster, and it'll start to speed up in an exponential fashion. And that's good. That's what I want for videography. You want slow movements unless you, for some reason, really need it fast, in which case you peg the joystick over and leave it there, and it'll eventually speed up. But in tripod mode, it's from the factory, and everything is slowed to an absolute crawl. In fact, the maximum speed, it doesn't just use Expo to change how quickly it starts and how quickly it stops. It actually dials down the total speed of your Mavic. I believe it's 3 miles per hour. So I've got my Mavic pretty much consistently going 45 miles per hour in sport mode, and that's the fastest. Tripod brings it down to 3 miles per hour. So everything you do moves super slow. It's great for interior flying if you want to fly in your house. That's supposedly what it's meant for, is very confined spaces. It would also be good outdoors if you're flying let's say in between trees in a narrow pathway, and you want to fly through the narrow pathway, and you want to be very, very minute in your movements so you don't accidentally clip a branch, that is where you'd use tripod mode. So I'll go over that again. So these two things kind of go hand in hand. My slowing down the factory settings on the normal speed of the flight, and then the factory setting called tripod, which is really even that much slower. And those are very useful settings for doing videography with your drone. So stay tuned. Okay, so this is gonna be a bit of a test, although it's not really a fair comparison to yesterday. Yesterday was -10 and windy as hell. Today is actually probably much warmer. I can actually see some of the snow on my driveway melting. So nonetheless, I got to deal with the weather it is. I'm leaving my Android tablet connected to the controller out here in my garage just to see if the battery dies really quick. I believe I had about 65, somewhere between 65 and 70% battery life on my Android when I plugged it in. I would have started with 100, but it said it was going to take 2 hours to get to 100%, and I don't want to wait that long. So, okay, I'm going to give up on that idea. If you look here, there's a red light. So what's happening is this Android tablet, and I've heard the same thing happens with Android phones, is actually drawing a little bit of current from this controller. And as you can see, I started with the controller at 100% and it's down to 88%. So what's happening is the Android is not getting, well, it's not a fair test. It's getting juice from the controller, and therefore it's not going to die. It's going to keep going probably until the controller dies. So I guess that could be an issue, although it seems like the controller has a lot more battery power in cold weather than my iPhone did. So as long as you can get through at least a battery or two with the controller, you obviously can then plug your controller into one of those little power bricks or something in between battery changes to go out and fly some more if you'd like. So it's not really as big an issue if you're getting a bit of a draw from your controller to your device. For some reason the iPhone doesn't do that. In fact, I think the iPhone might actually be going the reverse way, because if I'm not mistaken, yesterday looking at the video, when I was done and my iPhone was dead, that's at 100%. And my controller has got lots of juice left. My controller says it's still nearly 100%, which means my controller didn't lose any battery power the whole time I was flying. So leave comments down below if you've had the same issue with your iPhone. Is it actually drawing power from your phone to your controller, and that's part of the reason it's not holding a battery power. Now, I definitely noticed flying in warm temperatures, my iPhone lasts a lot longer. In cold temperatures, there's an issue anyway with cold temperatures killing the battery, but it certainly would accentuate the situation if this controller is actually sucking power out of your phone. So I'm going to give up on trying to see if this Android will die in the cold, because A, it's not quite as cold as it was yesterday, and B, it doesn't seem like it's actually getting lower. It's just slowly sucking power out of the controller. So let's go back to my iPhone so I can show you the settings that I've got on my Mavic to slow it down. Okay, let's go through some of the settings that I've set from the factory settings. To get to the settings, you need to hit this little triple dotted thing at the top right corner. Then you hit the little symbol for the Mavic. One thing that I had noticed that was switched off was the multiple flight modes. You want to have that switched on if for whatever reason you want to go from regular flight mode to sport mode. So you got to have that turned on. Mine was defaulted to off. My return to home, as I mentioned in the previous video, I've set to 40 meters. It's about 130 feet. At that height, I'm pretty sure that no matter houses or trees or anything, if I hit home and it has to go over things, 130 feet in the air is plenty high to get over power lines, trees, whatever. Beginner mode obviously off. Once you fly it for the first time, you probably don't need to be in beginner mode. Maximum flight altitude is set from the factory, and I haven't changed it, to 120 meters, which is like 400 feet, I think. So in Canada, the actual maximum height you're supposed to fly is 300 feet. I don't know why Canada's different than the United States, but I've had a few people put in the comments when I mentioned that it's set to 400 feet that it's actually 300 feet in Canada. So something to keep in mind. Enable max distance. I don't know, I don't have that set on. So advanced settings. So this is where you're going to get to your to slow your Mavic down from the factory settings. First, you're going to want an expo. And expo stands for exponential, and all that means is you see the little dot here. If I put the joystick to the right, the little dot goes up the exponential curve. If I go to the left, it goes down. Same if I go up, the other dot goes up the throttle and goes down. So I can't remember what the factory settings were, but they were definitely, rudder. That has been changed. I do not want it at 20 or 89, I want it at 20. So 0.2, and then you have to hit return. So pretty much just bring everything down to 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. I think they were like 0.75, and as you just saw, it was at 0.89. It doesn't mean you're going to take away from the speed of your throttle. It just means that the first part of the graph shows it's very minute at first and then it speeds up at the end. That's called exponential, and that's what you want if you're going to use it for videography, because you don't want it to just jerk to a start, jerk to a stop. It's not good for footage. Going down to the next setting, enable obstacle avoidance. Of course you want that on. Horizontal obstacle avoidance. I don't really know how this is going to work, but it shows a little picture there. It kind of implies if there's an object in its path on its way, like I'm assuming on its, if you hit home, it'll actually go around it. So I mean, it can't hurt to have that on. Enable backward flying. Now that's something I've thought about turning on. It means if you're doing active tracking and the person starts going towards the drone, it can back up if you've turned that on. The problem is there's no backward facing sensors on the Mavic, only frontward facing sensors. So I've left it off, which means if for whatever reason, whatever I'm tracking runs towards my drone will not just back up to try and keep it in frame. It'll just let the thing pass it. It's better safe than sorry. I can always turn the drone if I'm doing that, and it's so that it's facing the front of the drone again and follow it that way. It's just safer. I don't want to back into a tree or something. Enable obstacle avoidance. Again, everything obstacle avoidance is good, so I just leave them all on except for that backwards thing. This is just where you can set your C1, C2, all that stuff. I have C1 set to autofocus, and I have C2, which is the button on the back. These buttons on the back are C1 and C2. The C1 is autofocus, and the C2 is center weighted metering, which is like your auto white balance. It's going to look at the middle of the frame to decide what the white balance should be. All the other things I left pretty much exactly the way they were from the default. This is all stuff about your feed to your screen, high def and whatnot. I put image transmission settings to normal. You can set it to high def, but I heard that can affect the ability for your camera to, it affects the ability of your camera to record in the highest quality. So I just left it to normal. Battery, really is nothing here. I changed my low battery warning from 30% to 20%. I found 30%, it beeping at me telling me I'm below 30% is a bit annoying. So I changed that to 20, and I left the other one at the critical low as at 10. At flight time, it's just defaulted to that. Now here's the other thing you want to do. Okay, in the camera one, it's advanced settings. And then this is where you change things. So your gimbal pitch, I don't remember what it was at before. I think it was like at 50. I've switched it down to 16. So that just means the speed at which the gimbal goes down or up is really slowed down from the default, which is 50. And this is an important one, your gimbal pitch smoothness. So what that does is, if you have that set to almost the lowest setting, what happens is when you hit gimbal down, the minute you stop pushing your joystick or your wheel down for the gimbal, it'll stop instantly. When you move it up a bit, it means when you let go of the wheel, it doesn't jerk to a stop. It actually keeps going and slows to a stop. So it's more fluid and it's a better look for video. So I moved that up, and I moved the gimbal pitch exponential speed down. So I got this at 16 and I've got that up to 20. So with those settings, you're getting a lot smoother flow with your Mavic. It's not as quick and twitchy, but it doesn't mean the maximum speed is less. It just means that getting up to the maximum speed on these things just takes a little bit longer. Okay, now I'm going to show you about tripod mode, which is the ultra slow factory setting from DJI. So just so you know, you can't start lifting off. See my drone's down there just waiting. You can't start lifting off in tripod mode. So you have to take off first and then switch it into tripod mode. Also, yesterday I noticed that the footage seemed a little bit dark because everything being white, the snow, it tends to, the auto white balance tends to turn everything way down because of the bright snow. So I'm going to turn the exposure up to +1. Hopefully that'll make a big difference on that. So let's do the takeoff. So slide to take off.
Takeoff. The home point has been updated.
And you have to agree to all these conditions about yes, you're going to fly safely. But okay, so the next thing you do is you hit this thing here and you go tripod mode. You can see now it's going to be just like flying like normal, except for everything's going to move really slow. Alright, so now get my antenna straight up and down. It says tripod mode right on your thing, so in case you're not sure if you're in tripod mode, right in the controller it says tripod mode. So I'll bring it up a bit. See how it moves really slow? Well, I might as well set the recording now. So it's recording. And now when I go forward, look, I'm full stick forward. And as you can see, the drone's barely moving. So that's why I talk about very gentle movements with tripod mode. Perfect. Now I'll pan to the right. And you see it turns real nice and slow. And I'll bring the gimbal down a bit. Do another pan back around. Gimbal back up again. And what I'll do is I'll go down the road. I'll go down the road real slow. Well, I don't have a choice. It's going to be real slow no matter what I try in tripod mode. It's deathly slow. So as you can see it there in the background, I mean, I've got my joystick fully pinned forward and it is just crawling. You'll see the footage, I'll probably superimpose it, but the footage is just crawling along. So, like I said, it's good for, be good for a time lapse. If you wanted to have your drone slide sideways as you're looking at something like fast moving highways or something, things flying by and you're panning like you're on a slider, it'd be pretty cool. So I'll turn it around. And there we go, looking at me. Alrighty. And we'll come home. So that's pretty much it. Tripod mode. I'll slide sideways, make sure I'm lower than the wires though. And I'll slide sideways. And I'll go forward towards me. As you can see, really nothing I can do to screw this up. I got my joystick fully pinned as hard as I can. Obviously, if I just did a little bit of it, then I'd get a slower speed even, but if I go all the way to the top, that's as fast as I can go. Now somebody said, and I'll try this, somebody said if I hit the land button when I'm trying to catch it, I don't have to yank on the drone, so we'll try it. What do you know? Success. So if you hit the little land button, right now it looks like a takeoff button. If you hit that little takeoff button when it's flying, it's got a land button, and then you swipe to say yes, it'll actually come down and you don't have to fight with it. You just grab the body. I can't remember the person who commented on the last video saying you don't need to struggle with it. It won't fight you if you tell it to land as you're catching it. Thank you very much. That really saves me a lot of struggle. So you helped all the other viewers who also were doing it. I've seen a few YouTubers doing what I did, which is just grab it, hold on to it, and then kill the engine. So there is a better way, and it's called tell it to land and then catch it. So good job. So that's pretty much everything for this episode. We talked about how to turn your expos down and your other settings down from the factory setting, which was just way too quick. And then for ultra slow movements, tripod mode. So between those two, you should be able to get some really smooth videos. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If so, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe because there's going to be more tutorials on the Mavic Pro in the coming days. And that's pretty much it. I'll talk to you next time.